Hey everyone, today we're doing lesson 6 in the Polynomials chapter, section 3.7 in the textbook. We're going to be multiplying polynomials today. We have started multiplying polynomials over the last few lessons, but today we're going to look at more complicated situations and where we're pulling and adding, multiplying, and subtracting all together in one question. Okay, so we're just going to do a few examples together, 1, 2, 3, 4 examples, and that'll be the end of the lesson. Okay, we're going to solve all of these multiplying polynomials using the FOIL method, not the box method. Okay, and I'll try and use color as much as possible to make things nice and clear for you. First one here, I picked this question on purpose because often students get confused with this squared term here. All that squared means is you're going to multiply this polynomial with itself twice. So this is the same as writing 2r plus 5t times 2r plus 5t. Okay, so we're going to FOIL. And notice here these are a little bit more complex than ones we've seen before because we have multiple variables. So I'll show you how to deal with that as well. So when we FOIL, we want to take this first term and make sure it gets multiplied with both terms in the second bracket. So I'm going to have two yellow answers here. And then I'm going to take the second one and make sure it gets multiplied with both terms in the second bracket. So I'll have two pink answers here. Okay, so let's go one at a time. 2r times 2r. So 2 times 2 would be 4, and r times r would be r squared. Okay, next yellow one, 2r times 5t. So 2 times 5 is 10, and when the variables are different, you just simply write them next to each other. So r times t, so you can just write rt. Okay, you can't combine them because they're different letters. Okay, let's do the pink one. 5t times 2r, so I'm also going to get 10rt here. Typically, you write it in alphabetical order when you're writing the variables if they're different. So I'll write r first and then t. That's just a convention. It's not wrong to write in the other order, it's just not how you would see it in the answer key. Finally, you'll have 5t times 5t. So 5 times 5 is 25, and then we have t times t, which is t squared. Okay, here we go. And last thing we want to do is check for any like terms. So here we have two like terms. We won't necessarily have like terms every time we multiply, but in this case, we have two here. So we're going to add them together. So our final answer is 4r squared plus 20rt plus 25t squared. There we go. Okay, next question. This one involves a binomial that we're multiplying with a trinomial. Okay, so I'll use colors again to show you how the foiling works here. So we're going to take each term in the first bracket and make sure it gets multiplied to every single term in the second bracket. So this 2h is going to get multiplied with the h squared, the 3h, and the negative 4. Okay, and then same with the 5, it's going to get multiplied with the h squared, the 3h, and with the negative 4. So I'm going to end up with 6 terms in my expansion. Possibly some of them will be like terms that we can combine. We'll see. Okay, let's do the yellows first. So 2h times h squared, so that will be 2h cubed, because I have 3 h's altogether in that multiplication. Here we'll have 2h times 3h, so 2 times 3 is 6, and h times h, that gives me 2h's, or h squared. And finally, 2h times negative 4. So I'm actually going to change this to a negative sign because it'll be negative 8h. Okay, let's do the pinks. 5 times h squared, 5h squared. 5 times 3h, so 15h. And finally, 5 times negative 4, so I'm going to change that to a negative sign, negative 20. Okay, let's look for like terms. I'll use a different color here to indicate them. So we have two different h squared terms that we can combine into 11h squared. And then we have, let's see, we have two different h terms that we can combine together to make, so negative 8 plus 15, so that would make 7h. So altogether, here's my final answer. We have 2h cubed. That one didn't have a like term. Then we write our h squared term, so we have 11h squared, 7h, and then the minus 20, at the end that also didn't have a like term with it. Okay, there we go. Okay, next one is a little bit harder again. This time we're combining two different multiplication questions with an addition sign in between. So what we're going to do is two different foiling questions, and then we're going to add all the terms together. Okay, so let's do the first foiling first. We're going to use our colors again. So 2c times c and 2c times 5, and then we'll have the -3 multiplied with both of these as well. Okay, so let's write out what we'd have here. So we'll have 2c squared in yellow, 2c times 5, so 10c. I'll make sure I keep my colors consistent. Okay, let's look at the pinks. So I'll have -3c and -15. Okay, now let's look at the next bracket. Notice I've got a 3 in front here. So when you have a coefficient in front, what you want to do is multiply out the brackets first and then put the coefficient in at the end. So I'm going to just put +3 and keep everything in brackets. Then I'll multiply the 3 in after I do my foiling. So I'm going to use maybe different colors here. So I'm going to multiply the c with both terms, and then I'll multiply the -3 with both terms. So I'm going to have 2 blues and 2 greens. Okay, let's do the blues. C times -3c would be -3c squared. C times 1 would be c. -3 times -3c would be positive 9c. And finally, -3 times positive 1 would be -3. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to have to, there's a lot of steps here, multiply this 3 into every single term. And then finally, I'll be able to add up any like terms that I have and combine them into my very final answer. Okay, so I'm just going to rewrite everything from the first step. -3c minus 15. I'm going to multiply this 3 in, so I'll have -9c squared, positive 3c, positive 27c, and -9. Okay, let's look for like terms now. I'll use a color I haven't used yet. I'll use orange. So first I'll highlight anything that has a c squared and underline it in orange. Okay, there we go. Now I'll highlight anything that has a c next to it and highlight it in pink. And finally, I'll use purple to highlight anything that has no c's next to it at all, just any constant terms. Okay, so let's combine our orange terms together. So 2c squared minus 9c squared, so that would be -7c squared. Now for the pinks, positive 10 minus 3, that's 7, plus 3, that's 10, plus 27, so that would be 37c. And now finally the purples, -15 minus 9 would be -24. You have to pay attention to the sign that's in front of the coefficient. That belongs to that. Okay, there we go. There's our final answer. So something quite complicated turned into like a fairly simple polynomial in the end. That's the purpose of expanding and simplifying, is it does simplify the expression down into something much easier to work with. Okay, finally, our last example. This I would say would be the hardest example of the day. We're going to be doing two different expansions and then subtracting those two answers. Okay, so I'm going to keep the first expansion in a bracket and the second expansion in a bracket, and then finally subtract at the end. Okay, and remember these squared notation just means you're multiplying the same polynomial twice. So so another way to write this would be x minus 4 times x minus 4 minus 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. If you want to challenge yourself, you could pause the video here and try this on your own and then come back and check, but you can also do it with me. Okay, so we're going to have x times x times -4, and then I'll do pink, -4 times x, -4 times -4. So I'll have x squared minus 4x, that's my first two terms, then -4x, and finally positive 16. I'm going to keep that all in a bracket because I'm going to be subtracting it from the other expansion. And so I want to kind of keep those two polynomials that I expand separate. Okay, let's do this one. So I'm going to have my 2x, I'm going to multiply it with both terms, and then I'm going to have my -1, and I'm going to multiply it with both terms. So 2x times 2x would be 4x squared. 2x times -1 is -2x. I'll have negative 2x again and positive 1. Okay. What I kind of like to do is before I combine both brackets together, I like to simplify down like what's inside the brackets. So here we have some like terms that we can put together. I also have some like terms over here. So before I subtract the brackets from each other, I'll simplify those down. So negative 4 plus negative 4 is negative 8x there. And in this one, I'll have negative 4x. Okay, now I'm going to subtract. So when I subtract, essentially what it's going to be doing, subtracting is like the opposite of adding. So essentially like all these terms just switch signs. So like the opposite of adding 4 would be adding negative 4 or subtracting 4. The opposite of adding negative 4 would be adding positive 4, etc. So you can make this look a little bit easier for yourself by just switching all the signs. So instead of positive 4, I'll have negative 4x squared. I'll have positive 4x, and I'll have negative 1. And now we're just going to combine terms like usual. So any like terms can go together. So let's do the x squareds first, and then we'll do the x's, and then finally we'll do the constant terms. Okay, so let's do the pinks first. 1 minus 4 would be negative 3x squared. Let's do the oranges now. Negative 8 plus 4, so negative 4. And finally, 16 minus 1 gives us 15. So there's our final answer. And again, it looks a lot simpler than what we started with. So that's the purpose of this expanding here. Okay, that's the end of the lesson.